the age of 73.
Come up singing to make me smile.
Well, that was their big hit back in 1975. A #1 hit, Make Me Smile. Steve Harley had continued touring until recently, but had to cancel dates to have treatment for cancer. His daughter Greta says he died peacefully with his family by his side. And revellers have been gathering in cities around the world to celebrate St Patrick's Day. In Belfast, thousands turned out in the city centre to watch a noisy and colourful procession. No shortage of shamrocks, music and leprechauns in Dublin, where locals usually vie with tourists, packed along O'Connell Street to watch the annual parade. Organisers say it's the largest ever this year. But no one celebrates being Irish like the Americans. And Chicago is gearing up for the traditional parades, with the city's river dyed green as always. Well, for the latest news, you can sign up to our alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's time for Free Speech Nation.
The NHS bans puberty blockers, activists call for J.K. Rowling to be arrested, and the Scottish police unleash their hate monster. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. Now, coming up on the show tonight, Tony Sewell faced a backlash in 2021 when his government commission concluded Britain is not institutionally racist. He's going to be here to tell us about his journey from Windrush Baby to the House of Lords ahead of the release of his new book. And here to tell us about their manifesto for policing, we will have Sarah Phillimore from We Are Fair Cop and Dr. Kate Coleman of Keep Prisons Single Sex. And campaigner Maria Steen will tell us about the win on the no side of the recent Irish referendum and how she believes it was a victory for common sense. And, of course, I've got a lovely panel here of comedians who are going to answer questions from our wonderful studio audience. And my comedian panellists this evening are Cressida Wetton and Bruce Devlin. Green for St Patrick's Day.
I know, I planned it, Andrew.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
No, green is just your colour, isn't it? That's all it...
Tonight, yeah.
Tonight it is. And Bruce, he drove the snakes out of Ireland, didn't he? St Patrick.
Oh, did he?
No, not you, not you.
Oh!
He was thinking, God, how much did I drink? I don't remember doing that.
When you got thrown out of Harvey Nichols for drinking too much champagne, you were saying.
Yes, in Dubai, and I don't want to talk about it.
OK. No, you better not. OK, well, look, let's get some questions from our lovely audience. Our first question is from Izzy. Izzy, hi.
Hello, good evening. Has the HSE made a sensible decision on transgender health plans?
HSE's Health and Safety Executive. I know, Bruce, you were confused.
I thought it was the train that was going to Birmingham.
It's not.
Genuinely, I did. I was like, oh, my goodness,
can
I clarify? No.
So the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, they're the regulator in Britain. They've said that the new transgender health plan that they're implementing will not have to follow WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Healthcare. Now, I mentioned that because last week we did a special Free Speech Nation show about the WPATH files. All of these internal discussions and memos and messages from some of the leading healthcare professionals in the realm of transgender health were leaked. And, Cressida, it was discovered that a lot of leading clinicians in this area know full well that children can't give informed consent. One of the doctors was caught saying, oh, well, they don't even have high school biology, but let's put them on these medical practices anyway.
I mean, what a shock. Who knew a 9-year-old couldn't consent to life-altering puberty blockers?
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
What?
I know.
So, yeah, this is good news. What was the question? Is it sensible?
Yeah,
yes.
So the HSE are obviously taking it, perhaps in the wake of the WPATH files, but I have to say the mainstream media have just basically left it alone.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I've been doing some Googling to see who's covering it, and it's you. That's who's covering it.
Well, I looked on the BBC News website. It's been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Not a peep.
If you
I mean, it's absolutely incredible. They did put a story out about a cat in Essex who got a statue put up to it. Oh. Well, I mean, and look, I've got nothing against the cat, but I think the medicalisation and sterilisation of gay and autistic kids should take priority.
Well, I would argue that, yes, given that the licence payer is paying for this, that is something I think the public, you know, it's in their interest to understand about the WPATH files,
it's
in my opinion.
It's a bit maddening. And now, of course, Bruce, we've got the NHS saying they are banning puberty blockers. I mean, this is... I mean... They knew all along that there were no long-term studies, so they weren't sure. The most generous interpretation is that people didn't know what we know now in terms of the harm it can do to bones and to brain development. All of this stuff is coming out. But we were really experimenting on kids for all these years.
But they're only banning them in England. Is that correct?
Well, that's because Scotland is a law unto itself, isn't it?
I have been, and
You
I'm
have
aware.
been there, yeah.
The model is flawed.
So why is that? I mean, like, you know, we've had the Tavistock in the UK, which is being shut down because it was deemed unsafe for children. The Sandyford Clinic in Glasgow is the equivalent, and they're just going to power through. They actually are going to carry on with WPATH, even though WPATH says that doctors should be castrating people who say that their identity is eunuch. That's insane. Why is Scotland so... Sorry, I'm not blaming you.
No,
I know you're not a representative of Scotland.
No, thank you.
No.
I'm here on behalf of Harvey Nichols.
Yeah, I know. But it is a bizarre story, isn't it, all of this? Like, maybe eventually it'll just get resolved. I don't know.
I don't know, but you mentioned the Sandyford, and do you remember when people were worried about monkeypox?
Yes, yes.
And I thought, as the type of gentleman I am, I spend a lot on Botox, so I don't want to be human braille, so I went and got my monkeypox. I know that's maybe not a nice thing to say, but it's true. And the Sandyford didn't have any. I had a friend in Glasgow who was very worried about the monkeypox. I know that's not what you've asked me, but that's my association with the Sandyford.
OK, no, but I'm interested to know everything about
Yeah, no,
you,
I'll
Bruce.
pop back on the train to Birmingham and see what's happening.
So, I mean, Cressida, it is kind of mad that we reached this point, isn't it, that it took this long?
Well, yeah, absolutely it is. And, you know, it feels like a victory. I'm a bit concerned about the loophole, though. We're still allowed to do this to children. What's the right phrasing? It's not experimental, it's for research.
For
and I'm
research
thinking,
purposes.
Isn't that what we've been doing thus far?
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's all very well if you're dealing with, like, a rodent
like
or
human
something.
vivisection?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are experimenting on kids. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Also, people can go private. And this is why there was an attempt to have a debate about this on Friday. We're going to get to that later on because that was incredible what happened in the House of Parliament on Friday, and we will be talking about that in a while. So let's not do that now. Let's move on to a second question. We've got a question from Penny. Hi, Penny.
Hello. Do you trust Scotland's new hate monster?
You know
That's
what?
not me, by the way.
We invited the hate monster. No, this is the thing. It feels like quite an anti-Scotland night. It's not that, Bruce. I love Scotland. I adore it. I love tartan. Anyway, all the other things you've got. Tell me what you think about this, because the hate monster is effectively this creature that the Scottish police have created. We've got an image of the creature there.
It's red.
It's a red hate
It must
monster.
be angry.
Oh, yeah, it's furious, yeah. Well, it's very hateful.
Well,
and the idea... Now, what's going on in Scotland? So they're implementing these draconian hate speech laws, which are going to come into force on April the 1st, I kid you not.
Ironically, yeah.
And then, basically, you can go to your local mushroom shop or whatever.
Which I didn't know we had mushrooms farms in Scotland,
No.
because people aren't that keen on vegetables up the road. Not even a shiitake.
But you can report a hate crime at these private... But you can do it anonymously, and then the police will, I don't know, unleash the hate monster. I don't know how this works. What's going on?
I think the hate monster is mythical.
Yes.
And I don't think the hate monster actually exists. What I do think is existing... I'm genuinely really worried about comedy, right?
Yeah.
Now, believe it or not, some people in Scotland, they're wrong, but they don't like me. And the fact of the matter is, they could come... Because people don't necessarily listen to what you say. They articulate what they've heard or how they interpret what you're saying.
Exactly, yeah.
And I genuinely feel that a lot of time is going to be wasted. You know, if someone calls you a name in a shop, you probably deserved it, believe me.
Also, comedy can be quite offensive, particularly yours.
Well, no.
No, but you know what I mean.
So rude.
You can be quite waspish on stage. I think that's fair to say.
I think horrible, you know, to be honest. But I think that a lot of time, you know, I think a lot of people will abuse it.
Yeah.
They'll say that they're really upset. They'll go to the doctor. They'll spin their doctor along and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not necessarily sure, as I've said on the show before, I remember my mum was worried when Scotland had decided that all residential properties needed special smoke alarms, and my mum was convinced this was to do with the hate crime and that there was a camera in them, and was very resistant to getting hers fitted.
The thing is...
She's not nice. If you don't like me, oof, you don't want to meet Mary.
Bruce, I don't think she's being that paranoid. I mean, Scotland is a kind of nanny state. You know, actually, Humza Yousaf, when he implemented the hate crime bill, put a subsection in that which said that they can criminalise you for things you've said in the privacy of your own home.
But that's why my mum was worried about the cameras.
Well, then she's right, probably.
Yeah.
What do you think about this in terms of comedy? I mean, thankfully, Scotland doesn't have the largest arts festival in the world. Oh, wait, no, it does. It does. It actually does have that. And lots of comedians are up there. Now, we had this before, because if you go back about to 2003, when New Labour were trying to push through their racial and religious hate crime bill, which meant that if anyone complained about a comedy show, said it was blasphemous, offensive, the police would have to shut it down while they investigated it. And all comedians were up in arms saying, we're not going to put up with this. The comedians are silent now. Something has completely changed. There's been a gear shift where comedians are now basically for the regime.
Absolutely. Well, and it's not just that Bruce has started doing comedy, although I think that did happen during that time, didn't it? Yeah, it's devastating, isn't it? And the idea that the police are going to decide whether or not something's inappropriate. I mean, what? That's the point of audiences.
They don't know how to define hate either. I mean, in the Irish hate crime bill, which is going through at the moment, they actually define hatred as hatred.
Brilliant.
It's a complete circular definition.
Yeah, absolutely. And that tells me, when something's woolly, that tells me that it's not going to be applied fairly. It's going to be applied according to the person applying it.
But that was the thing, that you'd say that the police are going to take on board the complainer, not the person that they're complaining about. So that's the thing.
The formulation of it is that it's about the perception of the victim rather than complainant. So they're already bypassing due process within the legislation itself. It is insane.
But it was a bit like they tried to bring in a thing in Edinburgh where if you were, as a motorist, involved in a collision with a cyclist, you were automatically culpable until proven incorrectly. Yeah. Which, again, I think is wrong.
Well, there's a lot, and we're bound to be talking about this a lot more on the show. But let's move on to another question now from Armin. Hi, Armin.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Is the Union Jack controversial?
It depends who you ask. There is a chip shop, which is in Greenwich, called the Golden Chippy. And the guy who runs it had put this rather interesting mural of a humanoid fish. There it is. There's a picture of the fish there, which is rather nice and cheery, although a bit disturbing that a fish is trying to sell dead fish to be eaten by the public. But let's not think too much about it. And he's talking about how it's a great British meal, and now the local council have said this is inappropriate. They are demanding that it gets painted over. There's a big battle opening up because I think that I don't think it's the fish that's offensive. I think what they're upset about is the flag, and that the flag might upset people. This is what a Greenwich council spokesman said about this. Following a number of complaints made to local ward councillors, an enforcement case was raised about the mural in question. Our planning enforcement team is investigating this, as it is effectively an unauthorised advert for a chip shop. The owner has agreed to paint over it. We will always try to negotiate with the owner before proceeding, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Cressida, this is... I don't think it is to do with the unauthorised mural painting.
You don't think?
I think it's probably to do with the... Well, what do you think? Maybe.
Many, many moons ago, I used to work for a local authority in building control, which is adjacent to planning, and they are that petty. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. If you try and erect a sign without asking, there is going to be consequences. But I think what you're getting at is the phrase where they've said it's not suitable for the area.
Yeah, exactly. OK, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I was just thinking, would someone have painted over Jerry Halliwell wearing that Union Jack dress at the Blitz?
Well, they should have. It wasn't very tasteful, was it? I mean,
no, but it was fun.
It was fine, yeah.
It was fun.
I'm going to go with fine rather than fun.
OK.
Yeah. Well, look, you and I disagree about the Spice Girls.
Well, we do. That's true, actually.
Yeah.
Because you're not a real person.
OK, our final question. I can't believe that was considered controversial. At least I'm not the Scottish hate monster. OK, our final question now comes from David. Where's David? Hi.
Thanks very much. Is it wrong to say cheese when you pose for photos?
I love this story. This was about PETA. PETA, who are the biggest animal rights organisation in the world, have said, don't say cheese when you're getting a photo taken, because that could be upsetting or offensive, because it's a dairy product, and the animals are being exploited. We actually do have a promotional video. Can we see this?
And 1, 2, 3. Say baby slaughtered for veal.
Baby slaughtered for veal.
Say calf-cow separation.
Calf-cow separation.
Repeated and forced impregnation.
Dehorning retail docking.
Say cheese. No.
I mean, actually, baby slaughter for veal does create quite a good look, doesn't it? The smile.
Andrew,
I think
terrible. I find that advert very painful, because that last girl, that's me when I was 19. I would have been very on board with this, and I've just learned that that's not the way to persuade people, is it? Just being very pious and irritated.
But do you know what I think it is with PETA? That they are trolling. I genuinely believe this. Like, they are a big animal rights organisation, but they always say really genuinely stupid things. You know, they put out this tweet about how we shouldn't assume the gender of animals with a photograph photograph of a pigeon, and the pigeon had they/them pronouns, and I just kind of think they're not being serious. Or what they're doing is, I suppose, getting people to talk about it, because we're now talking about it. But they're trolls, aren't they? Deliberately trolling.
And if you pronounce it PETA, that sounds like feta, which is a cheese.
It is a cheese.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. They're complete hypocrites.
Yeah, toads.
Yeah, absolutely. OK, well, I think we've covered that. Next up on Free Speech Nation, Lord Tony Sewell will be here to tell us about his new book on his life, From Windrush Baby to the House of Lords. Don't go anywhere.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off, and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found, like, when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But it is but there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like, you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you... No, it's easy. If it's easy...
That's an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it, that simply.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. In July 2020, a government commission was set up tasked with looking into race disparity in the UK. It was chaired by Lord Tony Sewell, a product of the Windrush generation who had spent a lifetime in business, charity and politics. His appointment was criticised by the Muslim Council of Britain, which argued that Lord Sewell was keen on downplaying race disparities. The report published in March 2021 concluded that while racism does exist in the UK was not institutionally racist. And Tony's new book, Black Success, has just been published, and I'm delighted to say he's here to tell us all about it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, I suppose you could say the title of this book, Black Success, could relate to you. You are a success story. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about your background.
Well, there is an irony in the title, because, you know, black success, what is it? It's actually nothing to do with being black, actually. So, with everything else but that. But, I mean, my success, I suppose, has been driven by my mother, really, who was came over on that so-called Windrush sort of thing, 1950s. She ends up in a factory doing sort of micro kind of things, or electronics things, in a small factory down the road. in that situation, there are 30. She works with 30 white men. Yeah, I feel sorry for the 30 white men, you know? Because I mean, I'm telling you, she was the don of our area, the Pen. And actually, in the high street, the meat person, the greengrocer better get everything in order, because when she's coming down that high street, they just was running like flies. So we never understood anything about this thing called white privilege. It was kind of like, what is this thing going on? Because we ran things, you know.
Yeah.
And that kind of Jamaican kind of, I suppose, self-confidence that seems to have just escaped this new generation, you know, kind of they brought that over with them.
I mean, weirdly, people think this is controversial, what you're saying now, but there are a lot of people in society now who are told they will always be oppressed, they will always be downtrodden, not just black people, but certain sections of the community. But is that helpful? It's
not helpful, and what I want to say is that this also can actually hit certain communities. I don't want to pick on Liverpool a lot, but that I will do. I mean, in a sense, you can get yourself in this sort of situation where everybody's against us, the whole world's against us, that kind of notion. And I think that that's tended to happen here.
Absolutely.
And when in fact the reality is something different. As numbers in that report tells you, it's going elsewhere.
It's interesting that you mention your mother as well, because of course one of the things you do in the book so convincingly is talk about the family and how family is so important in certain communities, in black communities.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, in a sense, it can explain why there is a difference within... That's what we did in the report. We didn't want to lump everybody together as they have these acronyms called BAME and whatever, because we're not all the same. So, for example, the communities of Caribbean origin and Nigerian are really running different numbers at the moment and also in the past. I mean, and that explained a lot of the reasons why, in fact, in schools you can have a whole classroom of black children and the Nigerian children, who you wouldn't sort of know what the difference, I suppose, were doing much better than any other group, and then the Caribbean group were doing poorly. But then when you put the numbers on top, Caribbean was running nearly 65% single parents, whereas the Nigerians were running way under 30.
Yeah.
And so you then began to say, well, is the GCSE results to do with the horrible racist white teacher, or is it something to do with the family?
So that's so interesting, because so many people have said, you know, the educational system is institutionally racist.
That's right.
But as you say, if it is, why is it the case that children from African heritage are outperforming white pupils, but from Caribbean heritage are not? It's a very targeted form of racism, if it is.
It is, and it's a strange one, but it's one that we've grown up to, because we feel that we just make these generalisations about groups, and then we can't kind of get out of that.
Yes.
I mean, what's positive about the book and about what I'm trying to say is that I'm optimistic, because I think that particular Nigerian group are doing so well. They're going to go on. You're seeing people like Kemi Badenoch. You're seeing all these kind of people coming up now. It's a new day, you know,
Yes.
and we don't want to hear that misery story anymore, you know?
I suppose your critics might say, but, you know, are you suggesting that a single-parent family can't be effective, can't be loving, can't allow a child to flourish?
We saw my mother. She was the black Maggie Thatcher, going through the whole thing with her handbag, kind of... I mean, so I've been brought up with very strong black females, and that will always be the case. The men were really in the margins in some ways, you know? And so I don't really see that as the issue. What it does, it has policy implications, because if you don't recognise, for example, that a child is playing up in a situation, often it's because the mum and dad or the partner is in the background, and they're fighting over money and child support, things like that. And so you can't get to... Because I knew that as a teacher, I used to go back and find out what were the real reasons why this boy was playing up. And you go back to the family, you uncover that. Not have mass unconscious bias training for the whole staff that tells people that whatever. That's a massive distraction from what is going on in terms of the family. And we don't really want to go there, because we feel that it's sort of politically incorrect to kind of go back to the family. It blames the victim. And I think that's wrong.
And you mentioned white privilege. As a concept, this is something that is obviously has developed in recent years. But is that a helpful way? I mean, you could say, well, it is true that in a predominantly white country, white people are unlikely to face racial discrimination. Therefore, they have a form of privilege. So why is that an unhelpful framework?
In my life, I've never... Like, see, this is quite interesting. When you see a lot... So it doesn't happen all the time, but I think sometimes people feel that they have to say this. They have to go on, if they're successful, they have to say, how I overcome because I overcome this white person who was in front of me. Well, I never had any person trying to trip me up or everything. I've never had that jeopardy. It's not that I didn't experience racism, but I've never had that jeopardy. So I think that this whole idea of the idea that the privilege is stuck with you is difficult because the numbers don't show that. The numbers show a more complex story. And in fact, what I argue for is a different kind of way of almost looking at success. Could it be that what we need to do now, this would be really great, is to say to, particularly in London, where we have the great exam results, particularly for black children now, why don't we go and say, right, all you London kids and all you London teachers, go and help the white kids in Hartlepool, almost reverse missionaries. Go out there and help those poor white kids on the coastline who are not doing well. So it's a completely different framework of looking at yourself, not as some sort of victim, powerless, but you are the agency to help your own country. And this is the idea that Britain is owned by all of us. It's ours. It's not just little groups that have some privilege. Yes. And so that's how people should be seeing it now, that we should go out there and help other people.
But then you see some critics saying, but, you know, black children, you shouldn't teach them about Mozart or Shakespeare because, you know, they can't relate to that individual, you know.
Listen, let me tell you a story. I used to teach in Jamaica, and you know what the kids used to love? Chaucer's Wife of Bath. The reason why Jamaican kids loved it is that they related to Wife of Bath to dancehall situations in Jamaica. And so they could relate to her and all her antics and the sex and everything else. They could see it all around them, and they loved it. And they loved Macbeth. They loved all those stories. And we used to Jamaicanise them, and we used to make them so the witches would be like dancehall queens and things like that. Yeah, it'd be great. And so Shakespeare is in the curriculum in Jamaica. They never dare not take that off. Yes, you know, and. It's kind of ironic, you know. There's a poet, Louise Bennett, who somebody cancelled. Somebody, a horrible white male was cancelled for somebody writing, and they put in Louise Bennett. Now, ironically, Louise Bennett loves Shakespeare, so they've cancelled somebody who you know, the swap around has been wrong. Yeah. So. No, we love the classics.
I mean, it's interesting because, you know, Shakespeare belongs to all of us.
That's right. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And that's one of the great things about your book and about the work that you've done is that I think you're creating a really optimistic, positive message for young people. But why do you think that generates so much hostility, that you're changing the narrative?
Because we've all been brought up in this sort of misery narrative that black people and black kids and whatever are down there in the bottom of the well, and ever for them the story will be a negative one. We can't give them a positive story. And also, I think it's even more positive in the sense that are they really, in a sense, a template for the answer for the whole country? So they're a positive template, yet nobody wants to talk to them about that. Let me give you one sad example. There was a friend of mine. He had two daughters. One went to Oxford, one went to Cambridge, black, to do medicine. Yeah, and we just flew through grade A's, whatever. One of the daughters said, can we have a party to celebrate? Because the friends around were doing poorly, he said no chance because he didn't want to embarrass the rest of the community. So I'm in a kind of community that kind of hates success. Mm. You know, it's embarrassed to be successful.
Isn't that so interesting? Well, your book is called Black Success, The Surprising Truth. That is available now. I would highly recommend it. Tony Sewell, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And next on Free Speech Nation, Sarah Phillimore and Dr. Kate Coleman will be here to tell us all about their manifesto for policing. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it is remaining changeable across the country, but for the most part, it's going to be fairly mild. So as we end this weekend, still got low pressure in charge. This weather front here will bring another spell of rain as we go through the course of the night. Ahead of it, it does turn largely dry and clear, especially across parts of England and Wales. Some mist and fog forming in a few spots. And then behind it does then turn a bit drier and clearer for the end of the night across Northern Ireland. But for all of us, it is going to be a mild night. Temperatures not falling much lower than around 5 to 7 degrees. So we do start the day off with some sunshine across
eastern parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, Lincolnshire way, but the cloud further west will spread its way that little bit further eastwards. Any rain on it will slowly peter out, so not actually a lot of rain arriving into East Anglia. And then behind it, it does turn drier and brighter, some good spells of sunshine developing before then the next band of rain arrives in the west. Mild, temperatures potentially reaching 17 degrees in the southeast. Tuesday, a rather grey and damp start, plenty of spots of rain around. As the day goes on, we will see some bright spells across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, maybe Northern England too, and still remaining fairly mild. Wednesday, Thursday stays fairly changeable, quite wet potentially on Wednesday, but all the time temperatures for all of us in double figures.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later in the show, I'll be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Cressida Wetton and Bruce Devlin. We're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So email us at gbviews@gbnews.com and we'll try our best to answer all of your personal problems, believe me. Now, last month, Scarlett Blake was sentenced to life in prison for murder, but Thames Valley Police recorded the trans murderer as female despite being sent to a male prison. Campaign groups Fair Cop and Keep Prisons Single Sex say this is another example where policing has prioritised gender identity over biological sex, and together they've launched a manifesto in advance of this May's Police and Crime Commissioner elections. And to tell us more, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Kate Coleman from Keep Prisons Single Sex and co-founder of We Are Fair Cop, Sarah Phillimore. So to come to you first, I mean, the example of Scarlett Blake is just one of many. It's not just the media misreporting the sex of criminals, it's also the police in their recordings.
Well, exactly. I was really pleased that you opened with Scarlett, actually. I mean, this was a particularly horrific crime, I'm sure we can all agree. But it's absolutely vital that the sex registered at birth of offenders is recorded accurately by police forces. And the case of Scarlett Blake is by no means an anomaly.
Yes.
We conduct a yearly exercise where we ascertain how police forces nationally are recording the sex registered at birth of suspects in their crime and incident reports. And our 2023 report, which came out towards the end of last year, found that no police force nationally is recording sex registered at birth as standard in all cases. They're recording self-declared gender identity. In some cases, they're even trying to capture suspects' non-binary identities by recording the sex as indeterminate, other or unknown.
And that's not all police forces, is it? They seem to be having different rules depending on where you go.
There are different rules. There's inconsistency, but what is consistent is that there is no police force which is recording sex registered at birth of suspects as standard in all cases. So what Sarah and I decided to do as Keep Prisons Single Sex and Fair Cop was in advance of the elections to launch this manifesto for police and crime commissioners. Because, as you said, it's prioritising gender identity over biological sex, over sex registered at birth. And the point is that it's sex registered at birth, which is the variable which has got the greatest explanatory power for offending, for risk, for service development. So what this means is that when you have this ideological capture, not just that policing decisions are made which are not in the interests of the operational demands of policing and the criminal justice system, but they actively frustrate those needs.
Now, I think, Sarah, we've spoken before about the ideological capture of the police force, which I think by this point is beyond dispute. I think that is the case. But this has particular ramifications, doesn't it, for the police's ability to do their job without fear or favour. In other words, it particularly affects, often, those with gender-critical views.
Yeah, these elections are really important. The police and crime commissioners have a dual role. They set the targets and the standards for the police force, and they also hold them accountable. We need to be reminding the PCCs they have the power to sack chief constables. One of the key things in our manifesto is we want transparency on what groups the police are working with. Interesting video doing the rounds on Twitter/X today. A man called Claire, who's the head of the independent advisory group to the Essex Police, effectively saying that women with gender-critical views should be treated as terrorists. So we need to know who is influencing the police. You're right, that they have been corrupted by this is beyond doubt.
Is it the case that it's just a number of high-level activists within the police force and the judiciary, or is it the College of Policing? Can we go right back to the people who do the training of police?
Well, it's what the infiltration of this ideology/religion has been so powerful and effective because they have gone from the top. It's a top-down movement. The College of Police, I think, is inherently corrupted. And what we've got is lots of chief constables being very, very keen to push this. Another good example was Harry Miller went undercover at the Staffordshire Forces hate crime training. And most people, I imagine, have read what he reported back about that. I mean, these are our police. I had a look again at the 9 Pelian principles that govern the force. These were set out in 1829, really forward-thinking for the time. And I can't actually see that any force is now compliant with any one of those Pelian principles. And the danger is the police cannot operate without our confidence and our trust and our cooperation. And there's quite a large number of us now who are no longer willing to give that.
So, Kate, but why is it that this has been allowed to happen? You know, it's all very well saying you had the College of Policing inventing this thing called non-crime hate incidents and doing these kind of things, and you have various activists within the police force insisting on rainbow lanyards and insisting on targeting gender-critical women. But why doesn't the government say, let's abolish the College of Policing, let's revolutionise this, let's get back to those Pelian principles that Sarah's talking about?
Well, I mean, that's always the million-dollar question, and whenever I come on, whether it's talking about prisons or it's talking about policing or it's talking about data collection or the insanity that's happening in Scotland, it's always, well, why is it happening and why is it being allowed to happen? I think rather than kind of get too hung up about the causation, I think we need to focus on the specifics that are happening and highlight those and stand up against those. So, for example, if we're looking at searching of detainees, nationally, local police forces have put in place their own policies which allow for opposite-sex strip searching of detainees, which will include children, where the officer in question asserts a transgender identity.
But that has been challenged quite robustly, even from within Parliament, hasn't it?
That has been challenged in terms of the National Police Chiefs Council guidance. But from the time that that guidance was put in place by the National Police Chiefs Council in December 2021 to that challenge in Parliament, the damage has already been done because it's already been rolled out to local police forces. We foiled their local searching policies, and these policies, many of them specify opposite-sex searching should take place based on the officer's transgender identity. If you're looking at warrant cards and identity cards, the National Police Chiefs Council, they advise forces that where an officer has more than one gender identity, they should get more than one warrant card and searching card.
It sounds made up,
and in the
doesn't
wake of Wayne Couzens, I mean, really?
Of course.
I mean, are we?
I mean, this is the thing. Is so much of this stuff. It sounds so unbelievable, and that's maybe why a lot of it has taken taken place. Yeah,
yes.
you know. But it sounds like this manifesto is a good first step forward, Sarah. But I know that you've started to maybe doubt whether lawfare can actually do anything about this. You know, what can we actually do going from this manifesto forward?
I have been upset by the fact it's taking so bloody long, because we shouldn't be here. There are so many other things we could be interested in and doing. And for the past 6 years, we've been beating our head against the same wall. I do think lawfare is the only way out, and so is using your voice and your vote. Tell the PCCs this is what you need to see them doing, because this cannot continue. This will destroy the police force, because once enough of the population withdraw their consent and their willingness to cooperate, then the police are dead on their feet. They don't have the numbers. If you read the Pelian Principles, it's going through it like a stick of rock. Public trust and confidence, public cooperation. I'm not going to sit here while a man in a leopard print blouse lectures me about being a terrorist because I won't call him a woman. Now, if the police are really going to be guided by that, we all need to know. And so you need to go out and vote, tell your PCCs how you're going to vote, ask the candidates what their view are about this. The manifesto is a short and a snappy document. We can print it off, you can look at it on our websites, but this is becoming really vital because it's taken far longer than I dared fear.
Well, when you've got people who are so extreme, saying things like women with those views are terrorists and they are in positions of authority, you're going to get some serious pushback to any kind of reform, aren't you?
I'm just baffled and bewildered by what is happening. And it's almost though it's more than just cowardice and apathy. There's something really serious going on. But so while we still have a voice and we still have a vote, before I'm arrested and locked up for saying a man is a man, let's do something. Use your vote, May the 2nd.
Yeah.
Let's make it very clear to the PCCs what we expect to see in terms of accountability and transparency from the police.
And finally, Kate, I mean, a lot of people do think that, well, that kind of scenario that Sarah's describing, being arrested for accurately sexing an individual, seems so outlandish it can never happen. But, of course, Scotland are introducing their hate crime bill, and people have already called for J.K. Rowling to be arrested for accurately sexing an individual.
Well, exactly. And we know of women who have been hauled in by the police for the crimes of transphobia. For accurately sexing individuals.
Yes.
So it's absolutely not a fantasy. It's a reality. It's happening. I'm extremely concerned about what's going to happen on April the 1st. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
No.
When the hate crime bill comes into force in Scotland,
yes.
I think things are going to get extremely unpleasant.
So I know Sarah mentioned the website. Where can people find out about the manifesto?
So they're on both of our websites.
Yes.
Mine is kpssinfo.org, and you can also ask for hard copies and we will post those out to you free of charge.
Fantastic. And Fair Cop can be found online?
Yep,
as well?
just Google Fair Cop. I think it's faircop.org. So we've got a link to the manifesto. As I say, it's clear, it's punchy, it's short. So please do directly interrogate these candidates about what they're going to do about the principles we set out within it, because these are frightening times and women are being targeted. I mean, Jenny Swain, I think the last time I was on here, I remember it was breaking news. She'd been arrested for stickering. She's now bringing action against the police, and having watched the body-worn camera footage of her arrest, it's appalling, it's frightening. This could be any one of us, and we have to stop it.
Well, Sarah Phillimore and Kate Coleman, thank you both ever so much for coming. And next, Nick Buckley will be here to tell us why free speech features on his manifesto as he stands as an independent in May's Greater Manchester mayoral election. You're watching Free Speech Nation on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism. And parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also,
be
it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well,
to
I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers. I agree. And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Senior Conservative MPs have today moved to deny rumours of a plot to oust Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Penny Mordaunt was claimed to be the candidate of choice. If she was to lead the party into the next election, she'd be the 5th Prime Minister in just 5 years. It's fair to say politics is in a bit of a mess. And as a result, more people are moving away from mainstream parties and becoming independent candidates. Nick Buckley, MBE, is a charity worker from Manchester, standing as an independent in this year's mayoral elections on a manifesto which includes a charter on free speech. And he joins me now. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you're standing for these elections in 6 weeks' time. Yep. And one of your main focuses is on freedom of speech. Why have you chosen that?
Mainly because of what happened to me 4 years ago when I was cancelled trying to use my freedom of speech. And when I'm talking to my friends and I'm just walking down the street speaking to people, people say to me all the time, you can't say that. That's illegal saying that. You better be careful, Nick. And my answer is, none of this is illegal. And we've allowed the elite to convince people that their freedom of speech is now illegal. So that's why I wanted to create a free speech charter.
Now, I know we've spoken about this before, but some people might not be aware of what happened to you a number of years ago. You run a charity called the Mancunian Way for disadvantaged youth. Tell me what happened there.
So it was the summer of 2020. Black Lives Matter hit the headlines. There was a peaceful riot in London where 27 police officers, for some reason, got injured.
And the BBC described that as mostly peaceful.
Mostly peaceful,
apart from all the injury.
Yes, exactly. So I went onto the Black Lives Matter website, read what they wanted and thought, I don't like any of this. Wrote a 700-word blog on my personal blog page. People called me a racist and a Nazi straight away. The board of the charity I founded panicked, and through cowardice, they sacked me over email. I joined the Free Speech Union, we fought back, and within 5 weeks, I made the board resign in disgrace. We appointed a new board and they offered me my job back.
I mean, it's very interesting because a lot of people at the time just thought that Black Lives Matter was about standing up against racism, which, of course, we're all for. But, of course, their website had all sorts of stuff about Marxist ideas, defunding the police, demolishing the nuclear family. So it was about a lot of things. And, of course, recently the chapter in Chicago has come out in support of terrorism in the form of Hamas. So, this is not an organisation that really has all that much credibility.
To be fair to them, they were completely honest.
They were.
The problem was no one wanted to read their website or listen to anything they were saying. saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went through this cancellation, but you've come back, and this has made you a kind of more political figure, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah.
So tell me a bit about your campaign. What is it you want to achieve?
So my main policy is really about fixing the police. The police are broken across the country, but in Greater Manchester. You're more likely to be stabbed and murdered in Greater Manchester today than you were 5 years ago. How is that right? All the woke nonsense, the identity politics in the police, the two-tier policing system, your guests were talking about before, we don't even know what a man or a woman is anymore in the police. And as the Police Crime Commissioner, as well as Mayor, I'll be changing all that from day one. And if the Chief Constable doesn't like it, as those ladies said, I'll sack him. He's the only police officer I can sack. I'll sack the Chief Constable until we get one who will do what the people want.
So is Andy Burnham doing any of this already?
Andy Burnham is great at saying, nothing to do with me. I don't know anything about crime. You need to speak to my deputy.
Right.
And that's all he ever says.
OK, well, that's probably not good enough, is it?
It really isn't good. Really isn't good enough at all.
But, I mean, surely the majority of people would support the kind of policies you're advancing, because it's about treating us all the same and treating people equally and advancing a fair, liberal society.
Absolutely. The only people I don't want to treat the same are the criminals, and I want them hammered on a daily basis.
Yeah, OK. In terms of free speech, then, you know, we have various developments which are quite sinister. We've got this Scotland hate crime bill, which is obviously coming in on April the 1st. Ireland's pushing through one of the worst draconian hate crime bills that we've ever seen. In the UK, we've got hate speech laws in the form of the Public Order Act and the Communications Act. But no politicians seem to take this seriously. Why is it that the two main parties don't seem to understand the importance of this very fundamental principle?
They don't care. They've been captured themselves. We stopped voting for leaders many generations ago. All we vote for now are career politicians who are basically middle managers. They get told what their job is, so that's what they do. And they're always looking at, how am I going to get elected again? And we've been blind to this as the public. I mean, we live in a democracy. Ultimately, it's our fault that we've allowed the country to get to this state. It is our fault. So therefore, we can change it. We need to start telling our leaders, our politicians, this isn't good enough. And I'm not voting for you because of these things. I'm going to vote for somebody else.
I suppose people feel because of the first-past-the-post system, because we've got these two big parties, they don't really have a choice but to go for either Labour or Conservative. But do you think the future is really independents or smaller parties?
The future is to punish the politicians you don't like. Now, you might have to vote Labour to punish the Tories or vote somebody else. Those two main parties will change what they're aiming to achieve. If they realise by changing, we will get more votes and we will get into power. You've got to understand the nature of the beast. And the nature of the beast in politics is, I just want votes. Most politicians don't even believe in the policies they're pushing. They just want votes.
But surely there must be some politicians who are vocational, who got into this because they want to change society for the better, who got into this because they want to serve citizens, serve the public. What you're describing there as the kind of careerist politician. Are you suggesting maybe that it's tipped in the scales too far towards the careerist side, maybe?
It has, but even the people who go into politics for the right reasons, they're tempted every day of the year about promotion, more power, and lots of people end up being the politician they despised 20 years ago. So the system itself corrupts you, and that's why we need a whole new generation of leaders who will go into Parliament, who want to fix the problems of the country and don't care if it costs them their career, because they know they improved this country over 4 years. And if that's the end of my career, that's the end of my career. But we don't have that anymore.
So as an independent, you're free to say what you want?
And that's why I picked independent this time round, because when I was going on the hustings and speaking and campaigning a couple of years ago, people were saying to me, Nick, I'm not voting for you because I hate all the parties. I hate them all. I'm not going to vote for any of them. And when I went away, I thought, I need to address that. And I address it by being an independent. So whatever I say I'm going to do, I will do it. And if I don't do it, there's only one person to blame, and that will be me.
Nick Buckley, thank you very much. That's the end of the first hour on Free Speech Nation, but don't go away. There's a lot more still to come. See you in a moment.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it is remaining changeable across the country, but for the most part, it's going to be fairly mild. So as we end this weekend, still got low pressure in charge. This weather front here will bring another spell of rain as we go through the course of the night. Ahead of it, it does turn largely dry and clear, especially across parts of England and Wales. Some mist and fog forming in a few spots. And then behind it, it does then turn a bit drier and clearer for the end of the night across Northern Ireland. But for all of us, it is going to be a mild night. Temperatures not falling much lower than around 5 to 7 degrees. So we do start the day off with some sunshine across eastern parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, Lincolnshire way, but the cloud further west will spread its way that little bit further eastwards. Any rain on it will slowly peter out, so not actually a lot of rain arriving into East Anglia. And then behind it, it does turn drier and brighter, some good spells of sunshine developing before then the next band of rain arrives in the west. Mild, temperatures potentially reaching 17 degrees in the southeast. Tuesday, a rather grey and damp start, plenty of spots of rain around. As the day goes on, we will see some bright spells across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, maybe Northern England too, and still remaining fairly mild. Wednesday, Thursday stays fairly changeable, quite wet potentially on Wednesday, but all the time temperatures for all of us in double figures.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
I'm flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Should we put tobacco-style warnings on ultra-processed foods? Boris Johnson is calling on the government to do this. In this Daily Mail column, the former Prime Minister says that people don't know what they're feeding their families and there's too many extra ingredients. That's why I'm asking, should we put tobacco-style warnings on ultra-processed food? Well, joining me now to discuss, Steve Miller, former presenter of Fat Families, Helena Davidson, campaigner and policy expert at the Vegan Society. Right, so I'm going to start with you. Steve Miller, what do you think?
Oh, I'm applauding Boris today. Good on you, mate. And the reason for that is we know that the research on the warnings on cigarettes, I should say, when those warnings were visual, they worked very well. The second reason on a practical level is that we need to stop looking and listening before we start, grazing and putting things in the trolley. And the third thing is that, these kind of signs, or these warnings, I should say, are kind of hypnotic. They trigger the emotion. So they're much more likely to get people to think and maybe resist.
Yeah, so at the Vegan Society, we're broadly in favour of increasing consumer knowledge when it comes to the nutritional value of people's food. But I think it's important to mention that ultra-processed food isn't an issue that's exclusive to vegans. And whilst most meat alternatives will fall into the ultra-processed food category, it largely depends on how we're going to look at how UPFs are going to be assessed, because vegan alternatives that fall under ultra-processed foods, they're actually on average healthier than meat products or ultra-processed foods that contain animal products. Really? So I think it depends on how we look at it. We might have to take a closer look at the nutritional profile of individual foods rather than the level of processing.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, but let's get a news update first from Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, very good evening to you. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom.
At least 74 people have been arrested in Russia on the final day of an election Vladimir Putin is guaranteed to win. Thousands of people staged a symbolic noon against Putin protest, forming long queues at polling stations across the country in an apparent show of dissent. Allies of the late opposition leader Alexei Navalny, including his wife Yulia, called on voters to spoil their ballots, vote for any other candidate or write Navalny's name down. She led a demonstration outside the Russian embassy in Berlin, with similar scenes outside Russia's embassy in London. It is the third day of an election in which no genuine opposition figures have been allowed to stand. Transport Secretary Mark Harper says Rishi Sunak will lead the Tories into the next general election. Senior figures in the party have been attempting to downplay claims of a plot to replace the Prime Minister with Penny Mordaunt. The move would mean a fourth leader of the party in just 5 years. Mr Harper says that, unlike Labour, the Conservatives have a plan to deliver for the country.
We've got to show them, by the time of the election, two things. We've got to show them that we've got a plan, the plan is working and it's delivering for them. And I think we can see that it is on inflation and on taxes. We've also then got to show them that the Labour Party doesn't have a plan and will be a big risk. You know, for example, we know the Labour Party wants to spend £28 billion on their green plan. They've hidden the price tag now, but they don't know how to pay for it. That would mean taxes going up.
Well, motorists have been dealing with more disruption on the third day of the M25 closure, with reports of lengthy tailbacks. A 5-mile stretch between junctions 10 and 11 in Surrey is being closed since Friday night. A bridge has been demolished, but National Highways say the planned gantry has now been installed and the work is on schedule, so they will reopen the road on Monday morning at 6 a.m. Tributes have been paid to Steve Harley, the Cockney Rebel frontman who's died at the age of 73. Well, the singer, best known for the 1970s hit Make Me Smile, had to pause his tour last month to have treatment for cancer. Rod Stewart says he's absolutely devastated. Duran Duran's John Taylor thanked Steve Harley for the good vibes. His family, in a statement, said his heart exuded only core elements: passion, kindness, generosity, and much more in abundance. And it's March the 17th, which means today there's an alternative meaning to going green. Thousands of people across the UK and Ireland have turned out to celebrate St Patrick's Day, a noisy and colourful procession in Belfast. No shortage of shamrocks, music and oversized hats in Dublin, where locals vie with tourists along O'Connell Street to watch the annual parade. But if you really want to be surrounded by leprechauns, ginger wigs and genuine Irish heritage, there's no place like the United States, where people take it seriously, especially in Chicago, where they dye the river green. More pictures from that as we get them here at GB News. You can get updates by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, back to Free Speech Nation.
With me, Andrew Doyle. Now, on Friday, there was an extraordinary debate in Parliament about ferrets. Now, I've got nothing against ferrets. I think looking after their welfare is important. But a 4-hour debate on this one subject, now you might be thinking that something is amiss. So here's Labour MPs Maria Eagle and Sarah Champion.
There ought to be further provisions in respect of safety of ferrets that are not set out in the regulations so far that have been said. So I'd be interested to hear what the Minister might have to say about that.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will give way, of course.
I am very interested about my honourable friend's, keen mention of ferrets at every opportunity during this debate. And just to put on record, my brother had a ferret called Oscar.
Well, she has that now on the record. I don't really know what else to say about that, except I'm sure that Oscar brought her brother
great joy,
and that's what pets do, and I'm sure there are many other ferret owners who might attest to the same thing.
So this was a discussion on the animal welfare bill, which could have been over within 20 minutes, let's face it. And the reason it took 4 hours is that politicians were filibustering to prevent a debate on Liz Truss's Health and Equality Act's amendment bill, which would have offered protections for women's spaces, prevented the social transitioning of children in schools and banned puberty blockers. So apparently, many of our MPs think that domesticated polecats are more important than the safeguarding of women and children. And to be honest, it was a cross-party affair. So here are Tory MPs Mark Spencer and Peter Gibson.
It would be remiss of me not to put on the record my 3 dogs, Tessa, Barney and Maisie, and my cat, Parsnip. And there's been a proud tradition this morning of mentioning various pets, including Harry, George, Henry, Bruce, Snowy, Maisie, Scampy, Becky 1, Becky 2, and Pixie, who are the cats. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. I omitted earlier to put on the record the names of my own dogs, Clemmy, Peppy and Ebony. And Clemmy, as we all know, came 3rd in the Westminster Dog of the Year show in 2022.
Well, he's corrected the record. There were, of course, 2 ferrets, one of who passed away, Rowlett and Oscar.
What an absolute farce. It's a waste of parliamentary time, it's insulting to the electorate, it's dismissive of women's rights, and it shows a complete disregard for the medical experimentation on children that has been taking place on the NHS in plain sight. And as a result of these shenanigans, Truss's bill will now be delayed until the 22nd of March, but as it's going to be the last on the day's agenda, it's unlikely to be debated at all. Now, you would think our representatives would take this matter a little bit more seriously, but no. When challenged on this, here was Sarah Champion's response. Gotta love a ferret, powerful and full of love. Well, Sarah Champion, perhaps your trivialisation of these important issues might not look so impressive in a few years' time, when everyone has woken up to the madness of recent years. Women are concerned about their single-sex spaces, and children have been medicalised for being autistic, gay or gender non-conforming. Both political parties are effectively supporting a new form of gay conversion therapy. But they don't want to talk about that. They wanted to compare the names of their pets. Why? Because getting one over on Liz Truss is apparently more important than the safety of children. I'm sure in a few years' time there's going to be a lot of people claiming they never went along with any of this. But it's all on Hansard now. So perhaps all the MPs involved in this infantile filibustering might want to start thinking of their excuses now. Because in the future, they might be asked, what did you do about the state-sanctioned medical experimentation on children? Oh, well, we spoke about ferrets. Well, I'm willing to bet that history isn't going to look too kindly on that sort of thing. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So I want to bring my panel in on this issue of the filibustering. Cresta, I think it's mad. I think it's absolutely mad. And I think it's really insulting. And I think those people, all of them involved, deserve to be voted out.
Oh, 100%. And like you say, how is this going to age? I can't wait to bring this out in, what's it going to be, 2, 5, 10 years? I mean, It's just appalling. I don't understand it. It leaves me speechless.
I think the generous interpretation is none of them know anything about this subject. They just don't.
Well, it's also a generous interpretation, isn't it? You hope that they don't.
Yeah, but how can they not? The NHS has just banned puberty blockers. They've just done it. The experts, the Cass review said that the Tavistock wasn't safe. We now know that this is medical experimentation. We know there were no long-term studies. Is ignorance at this point really an excuse from the likes of Mark Spencer and Peter Gibson and Sarah Champion?
Absolutely not. No, I'm just appalled. It's absolutely not. And they're just copying the trans activists, aren't they? They're not having the debate. You know, the slogan is no debate, and rather than discussing it or challenging what the Cass report found, they're just messing about and smirking.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What does filibustering mean?
OK.
No, because I'm going to start using it.
Filibustering is when you delay. It's when you delay by just talking nonsense. And it's a tactic that's often used in you do it a lot, yeah.
I feel seen.
And it's a tactic that's used in Parliament. You see, at that point, they needed to extend the time of that debate to prevent Liz Truss's bill being debated. So they just talk nonsense. But it's so brazen. I mean, listening to them listing the names of cats and dogs and ferrets, and you just sort of think...
Yeah, it's a huge waste of time.
And why can they possibly justify that to themselves? I don't get it.
It's a job I think I would like, because it's well paid and you just speak absolute rubbish. I wouldn't be able to swear, but yeah, that's great. That Eagle woman, is she related to Angela Eagle? Yes. Thank you. Don't you think Angela Eagle looks like Vivienne Westwood?
Well, I'm glad we're covering the important aspects of this. You are filibustering. But aren't they, President, what I don't understand is why are they not embarrassed? Why is it when Sarah Champion's called out on this, she just makes a joke? Why can't they see this?
I genuinely don't know, and it makes me think, is that how MPs think of us, the electorate in general? You know, because obviously, we all know they claim massive expenses and they have these well-paid apartments and jobs and what have you. And it's just like, wow, that is, as you say, very brazen.
Yeah, incredible stuff. OK, well, anyway, let's get some more questions from our lovely audience. Our first question comes from Miranda. Where's Miranda? Hi.
Hi, good evening. Has J.K. Rowling actually committed a crime?
OK, well, I think, Miranda, the answer is no. But that hasn't stopped activists from trying to get her arrested over misgendering. And this was a complaint that at first was dismissed by Northumbria Police. But, of course, we have the Scottish Hate Crime Bill coming in on the 1st of April. This is to do with India Willoughby. J.K. Rowling pointed out that India Willoughby is male. India Willoughby said that this was a hate crime and that J.K. Rowling should be arrested for it. But, of course, J.K. Rowling has sent this woman abuse for a number of years now. India Willoughby's a troll, effectively, and has just been really rude and nasty about people online. And then when you get a little bit of pushback, suddenly, run off to the police.
But that was, I was telling you about Gillian Michaels, the trainer in America, and she said a lot of people, well, she was talking about Gen Zs. I don't really understand what that means. But anyway, we'll digress. And what she was saying was a lot of these people that have these arguments, the minute that they're backed into a corner or they don't have anything positive to say, then it's you hate me, you've threatened me, and I'm going to a higher authority.
Well, that's
and it's all about people trying to get the last word, as far as I can see.
I mean, it's very interesting because a lot of people say, out of courtesy, they will call people by the pronouns they prefer. But India Willoughby has not been courteous, quite the opposite. So why on earth is he deserving of our courtesy?
Well, I don't think... I mean, I still say she. I don't think India Willoughby is deserving of courtesy. I think India Willoughby's had a very narcissistic sort of way of dealing with the world. And also, I don't think India Willoughby is really sort of in it for the right reasons. She's not worrying about the trans experience en masse. It's about India Willoughby and the brand, and I've got no patience whatsoever.
And what will happen? I mean, Bruce, you were talking earlier about the ramifications for comedy and this kind of thing. You know?
I genuinely think that something will... not that I'm psychic or anything, but I think one of these hate crime things, they will try and push something through against J.K. Rowling because then they've got a prize, don't they? They've got a really high-profile person, should I say, and then that makes this hate bill seem, it'll have done its purpose.
Well, I mean, the question was, has a crime been committed? Well, not here, but what's going to happen in Scotland?
Well, that's the issue, isn't it? And I know that J.K. Rowling in the past has tweeted out saying that, she'd be happy to serve prison time for misgendering to make the point, to push back against this stuff. And, on the back of what we were just talking about earlier, with Kate Coleman and Sarah Fillmore, we have to take a stand against. This is authoritarianism in its essence.
Yeah, no, it's scary. And what I will say, and I'll include them both in this, both have committed crimes against fashion. No one's talking about it.
Let's get a question from William. Where's William? Hi, William.
Hello. Can paintings be racist?
Well, I suppose it depends on what you paint, William, but I know what you're talking about. This is the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. They've suggested that paintings of the British countryside evoke dark nationalistic feelings. Now, you know what's happened recently. So in recent years, whenever you go to an art gallery, there's always these little plaques next to the paintings basically hectoring you about how evil the artist was because he was born 300 years ago and they thought a little differently than we do today. Well, the museum's director at the Fitzwilliam Museum has basically said that, this panel is just... It's not a woke thing. It's not a woke thing. They're just pointing out that if you look at paintings of the countryside by Turner or whoever it might be, if you look at Constable's The Haywain, you'll suddenly start goose-stepping and, it's bound to happen. I mean, I think these people are self-satirising at this point.
Absolutely. And I worry about people who are so not robust that this could really impact... A painting could have that much of an influence on them. I mean, what are they going to do about everything else in the world?
I also just think, given what I was talking to Tony Sewell about earlier, this just strikes me as incredibly racist. The idea that the great paintings from British history don't belong to black people, that we're not all part of the same nation.
Well,
exactly. What is going on?
I feel like I've got as much to do with a picture of an old hay barn as somebody the same age as me who happens to be black who's English. It's like, why do I have more claim over it than they do? It's a very weird idea.
Do you think the countryside is racist?
I think it depends where you go.
It does. It does.
No, honestly,
there are some very xenophobic hedgehogs in the Cotswolds.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah.
I was once called a nasty name from a squirrel.
Yeah.
But that was another hate crime. No, I don't get, by looking at a painting of a hill, that would invoke nationalistic tendencies.
No,
it's like you really have to maybe.
It's a real stretch. When they were doing the Hogarth exhibition at the Tate, there was a self-portrait. He's sitting on a chair, and the plaque said something like, "The wood that the chair was made out of might have come from a plantation or a slave or the slave trade." It was so tenuous that it was actually beyond ridiculous. But why do they bother? And do you remember the what was it? The Mary Rose, the Tudor ship, where they were trying to queer the Mary Rose, and they put up a blog on their website talking about a queer knit comb and an old Tudor mirror, and they said, well, sometimes queer people would look in the mirror and it would reaffirm their identity. These people are insane, just really insane.
I think queer people look in the mirror and think I'm due for Botox, so come on, let's get on with it.
But I would put it to you that in Tudor times they weren't thinking of Botox particularly.
I don't think you can speak for them, and I think that's racist.
That's true. That is true. OK, well, next on Free Speech Nana, campaigner Maria Steen will join us from Ireland to tell us about the no vote in last week's referendum on family and care. Don't go anywhere.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners. And Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of oestrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Referendums proposing changes to the constitutional definition of family and on the issue of care were comprehensively defeated in Ireland last weekend. In the ballots, the government proposed expanding the definition of family in the constitution to recognise durable relationships, such as cohabiting couples and their children, and replacing the language around women in the home with language recognising care within families. One of the most vocal no campaigners was barrister Maria Steen, and she joins me now. Welcome to the show, Maria. Can I ask you first to begin with, what is it about these constitutional changes that you most objected to?
Well, there were two questions put to the Irish people. The first was in relation to family and the redefinition of family. So as things stand under the Irish Constitution, the family, Article 41 defined the family as founded on marriage. Now, the government put a proposal to the people to change that so that it would read, the family was founded on marriage or other durable relationships. But they wouldn't tell us what the definition of a durable relationship was, saying instead that it should be left to the Supreme Court decide. So essentially, the Irish people were being asked to vote on something that they would find out later what it meant. So that was the first issue. The second issue...
Go on, sorry.
The second issue was in relation to Article 41.2 of the Constitution, which refers to women and their work in the home and the service that provides for society. It's basically an expression of gratitude. And secondly, it went on to say that a mother should not be forced out into the workplace out of economic necessity. So it was putting, if you like, an onus on the government to help support mothers who wish to stay at home with their children. The government wanted to erase the word woman, the word mother, and the word home from the Constitution. And instead, what they said was they wanted to replace what they said was outdated and sexist language with a gender-neutral proposal. And
now we've heard a lot about this kind of changes of language by activists who are promoting gender identity ideology, but it's a little strange, isn't it, when it's coming from the government?
Yes, and the thing about this proposal was that there was a stifling consensus in terms of the Irish political landscape. So it wasn't just the government that was supporting this, but every other political party, bar one, supported it. All the establishment, basically, were pushing for this change. And what was really highlighted in the results of the two referenda was that the political elites and the establishment were totally out of step with the Irish people, who comprehensively rejected the proposals.
Now, we've seen that again and again, haven't we, where those who are in charge, those who are in power, are not in step with the public. And this referendum is a further example of that. But why do you think it's happening particularly in Ireland? I've spoken to people who've made the case that ever since Ireland tried to distance itself from the Catholic Church, had the referendum on same-sex marriage, that they've actually just embraced a new kind of state religion. Do you think there's anything to that?
I think there is something to that. But interestingly, I suppose what was different about this particular referendum was that in terms of the no campaign, there was quite a broad coalition. So it wasn't just Catholics or Conservatives that were against this. There were a number of feminist writers who were against it because of course, the degendering, if you like, of women and the desexing of women and anything to do with motherhood. But there were also people right across the spectrum who had issues with this. One of the big issues was the redefinition of the family, and the government refused to entertain the valid concerns that the No campaign had. For instance, that the words durable relationships could bring in the recognition of polyamorous relationships and what that might do to the definition of family. And they simply weren't able to answer the questions that were put to them on that. So I think the Irish people smelled a rat and decided to reject it.
And it's not just the political class, is it? I mean, I think the Dublin media class in particular is very much skewed in one particular way. But at what point will these elites, as you describe them, realise that they're not in sync with the public and that maybe they should be listening to what people are saying?
Yeah, well, that remains to be seen. You're right. Certainly both the print and broadcast media, there is, as I say, a stifling consensus among them, and a kind of a refusal to recognise or give a voice to those who don't toe the political line. So we'll see if this is a wake-up call for the politicians and for journalists, or if they will continue as they have been doing up until now.
Do you fear, Maria, when it comes to this changing of language, that this is going to be particularly important when it comes to the Irish hate crime bill, which defines hatred as hatred? In other words, a completely circular definition. That could surely be exploited against anyone who takes a contrary view.
Absolutely. And you're right to say there is no definition in the bill of what hatred is. So essentially, we're looking at thought crimes. The consequences in the current bill for people are significant. So if you're convicted of a hate crime, you could face up to 5 years in jail for such a hate crime. And again, because of the protected classes of people that are listed, particularly somebody who is religious or conservative, simply expressing a view either online or in person, could find themselves convicted of a crime under this bill. And police are given powers as well to enter a premises and search computer records and so on. So it's a very concerning development.
And finally, Maria, what can people do about this? Because if all of the political parties are in lockstep and people's voices aren't being represented in the media, what route out of there is there in this situation? Or do we just have to resign ourselves to an authoritarian future?
Well, no, there's an election coming up, actually, next year, early next year, or possibly by the end of this year. And as I said, there was one party, a small party, that did not, that swam against the political tide. And I think, I hope they do well in the next election. They certainly deserve to. We also have some very good independent candidates, and I hope that they will be rewarded in the next election too. But for the political parties, I think this referendum should be a big wake-up call for them. And I hope that they will rethink their attitude. There is, in Ireland, towards people who do not agree with the kind of woke consensus, there is an attitude of regarding us as a basket of deplorables, or in those kind of terms. So that attitude needs to change. Ultimately, we live in a democracy, and the politicians need to listen to the people. That's what the purpose of this referendum was. It was to put a question to the people. And if they continue to ignore the voice of the people, I think they will pay for that.
Well, congratulations on your campaign. Maria Steen, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Andrew.
And next on Free Speech Nation, we'll be discussing NHS England's decision this week to end routinely prescribing puberty blockers. You're watching Free Speech Nation on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it is remaining changeable across the country, but for the most part, it's going to be fairly mild. So as we end this weekend, still got low pressure in charge. This weather front here will bring another spell of rain as we go through the course of the night. Ahead of it, it does turn largely dry and clear, especially across parts of England and Wales. Some mist and fog forming in a few spots. And then behind it does then turn a bit drier and clearer for the end of the night across Northern Ireland. But for all of us, it is going to be a mild night. Temperatures not falling much lower than around 5 to 7 degrees. So we do start the day off with some sunshine across eastern parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, Lincolnshire way, but the cloud further west will spread its way that little bit further eastwards. Any rain on it will slowly peter out, so not actually a lot of rain arriving into East Anglia. And then behind it, it does turn drier and brighter, some good spells of sunshine developing before then the next band of rain arrives in the west. Mild, temperatures potentially reaching 17 degrees in the southeast. Tuesday, a rather grey and damp start, plenty of spots of rain around. As the day goes on, we will see some bright spells across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, maybe Northern England too, and still remaining fairly mild. Wednesday, Thursday stays fairly changeable, quite wet potentially on Wednesday, but all the time temperatures for all of us in double figures.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. NHS England announced this week that from next month they will no longer routinely prescribe puberty blockers. They will be available in the future, but only through a mandatory research trial. So here to discuss in more detail, I have co-founder of LGB Alliance, Kate Harris, and founder of Transgender Trend, Stephanie Davis-Arai. Stephanie, I want to come to you first because Transgender Trend has been sounding the alarm about puberty blockers for a number of years. I saw an article by Michael Biggs, a researcher at Oxford, today in The Telegraph, who has also been instrumental in raising the problems here. Can you tell us a bit about what you've done when it comes to this issue?
So Michael approached us. So we've been raising the alarm about the use of puberty blockers, about this, because it's an experimental treatment of children. And, you know, as soon as we understood what was happening at the Tavistock. I mean, part of the reason that I set up Transgender Trend in 2015 was knowing that this treatment was being given to children. At the time, a puberty blockers trial was happening. It was started in 2011. In 2014, that trial was rolled out. It's initially a cohort of 44 children. It was rolled out to anybody coming in without any results having been published, and that led to the first article that Michael Biggs wrote for the website. He'd previously tried to get me to do a talk at Oxford University. That had been cancelled. So we had the usual things going on, but that's when Michael first wrote, and we...
But it's interesting because he's an expert in this field, but it was quite brave of him to say something about this because they knew there were no long-term studies into this, and now we know the risks to brain development, to bone development. So you were right, and he was right.
And really, yeah, I mean, he risked his career. He risked, you know, as everybody does, and damaged his career through doing this. We really have to credit Michael because, you know, he's a researcher. He's at Oxford, and because of his research, now the thing that he found in an FOI was an internal report that showed the increase in the number of children who tick the box for more likely to self-harm or attempt suicide after a year on puberty blockers. So everything they said about puberty blockers being beneficial and even life-saving, that if you don't allow it, kids are more likely to take their own lives. All of that kind of emotional blackmail they used was false. These blockers were having, you know, detrimental results after a year. But even so, they rolled the trial out. Now, but from Michael's research, that got to Newsnight. We all know what happened then. Newsnight did, I think, 2 episodes on blockers and did more episodes on the trial, and Michael was interviewed, and I think that was really the start of this whole process.
And it's very interesting, isn't it, Kate? I want to bring you in here because we know now that the majority of children who do feel feelings of gender dysphoria, that puberty resolves those feelings. So in other words, we were blocking the cure for most of the time. But also we know from Hannah Barnes' research that between 80 and 90% of adolescents referred to the Tavistock were same-sex attracted. So what was happening here is gay children were being fixed, heterosexualised on the NHS. And that's why LGB Alliance presumably has such an interest in this.
Yes, it's a horror story, but we're beginning to get to a happy ending. We're not there yet. LGB Alliance is the only charity in the United Kingdom that focuses exclusively on promoting the rights of lesbian, gay and bisexual people. And we are absolutely delighted with the news that came out on Tuesday. The NHS bans puberty blockers. Now, that has gone around the world. Even Joe Biden is now being challenged to look at what he's doing in America. So this is very good news, but it's not good enough. And I'll tell you why it's not good enough. It's because, A, there are loopholes. B, there's a media, apart from your brilliant work, and I have been told by my team I am not to come onto this programme without thanking you for your courage and bravery in shining a light on all of this.
Thank you.
But the media in general does not want to discuss it.
But also people are attacked, aren't they? I mean, you've been smeared and called all sorts of names. When Roisin Murphy, the musician, raised concerns about puberty blockers, she had shows cancelled, she was smeared in The Guardian and all sorts of things. She was right, and you were right.
She was right. We were all right. Graham Linehan was right. Everybody said puberty blockers are utterly shameful, I would say verging on criminal, child abuse. But let me show you my handy poster. I made this earlier. This is just one example, because we, LGBT Alliance, are not allowed to speak on BBC. We are not allowed. You will never hear us on ITV, Channel 4, because there is has been a very effective campaign from Stonewall, my organisation, where I've said to you before, my DNA was in Stonewall.
Yes.
Until 2015, when the incoming CEO, Ruth Hunt, decided to add the T. Thank you, Alicia Kearns. LGBT Alliance has not removed the T. The T was added by Stonewall in 2015. But just as an example of the type of censorship that we face, and we believe that we represent the views of the vast majority of people in this country, I'm going to show you this poster. This poster says, basically, well done, NHS. There is a little bit more to do, but there is nothing controversial or law-breaking about this poster. It simply says, we are pleased that the NHS will no longer be prescribing puberty blockers, saying that there is not enough evidence of safety and clinical effectiveness. And it goes on to say, but there is more to be done. We urge MPs to close the loopholes. There are unscrupulous clinics out there, and there are unscrupulous organisations like Stonewall, like Mermaids, and many others who are going to encourage children to go online to buy these drugs that have no clinical effectiveness. We were not allowed to place this advert. So this is what we're facing now.
And we've seen in Parliament this week, when there was a debate about precisely this issue, about the loopholes you describe, about the fact that private clinics can still prescribe these drugs, and they filibustered by talking about ferrets for 4 hours.
Yes, and we've seen that despite Sarah Champion on Twitter today saying, oh, it was just as much the Tories as Labour, it wasn't. It was predominantly Labour who decided deliberately to filibuster. We could see Maria Eagle, we could see Lloyd Russell Moyle smiling, laughing as they discussed ferrets' names.
I think they forget that there are cameras in the House of Commons.
I think they do, and they will hang their heads in shame, because what we're seeing, thank God, is a return to sanity. Thank God for David Bell. I think there was
the whistleblower from the Tavistock.
The whistleblower from the Tavistock, who told us on Evan Davis's shockingly biased discussion on Tuesday. This is the end of the transgender trial. There has never been a transgender trial. Gender dysphoria is a symptom. We are now entering, we hope, a period of clarity, of science, and of safeguarding for children. And my heart goes out to every child, every family who has suffered because of these gender identity zealots who put their own justifications for their mad cult beliefs before the safety of children.
And finally, Stephanie, with all of that in mind, it's still going to be... I mean, I can see that Kate is right, that things are going in that direction. We are learning more. The NHS ban is a big step forward. But as we saw in Parliament, there's a lot of very powerful people who are still caught up in this cult, and they still think that they're doing the right thing, and they think that they're protecting trans-identified people. But are they?
There's still a lot to do. There's still the message that gender affirmative care, and I mean the experiment of social transition as well as the medical experiment of blockers and hormones. But the message that that is beneficial to children, it's good, is so deeply embedded now throughout society from groups like Stonewall and Mermaids. And I think we have to stop and say, well, OK, is it good or is it bad? Is it harmful? Is it actually child abuse? Let's ask those questions and not just accept unquestioningly that gender-affirming care is a good for children. I don't think it is. I think it is a child abuse. I think it is harmful, and I think it has proven harms and no proven benefits.
Well, Stephanie and Kate, thank you both so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Now, we did approach Stonewall and Mermaids for a statement. We received the following from Mermaids. This announcement is deeply disappointing and a further restriction of support offered to trans children and young people through the NHS, which is failing trans youth. There were virtually no first appointments offered in 2023, with ever-growing waiting lists of over 5 years. And they also say Mermaids will continue to advocate strongly for access to timely, holistic and supportive healthcare for trans youth, including access to puberty blockers to those who need them. Everyone deserves access to healthcare and to live happy and healthy lives. Trans youth are no exception. So next, Lee Anderson and Dylan Mulvaney both launch new pop careers. Yes, it's time for social sensations. You're watching Free Speech Nation on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm sure you have seen this video that went viral this week, and if you haven't, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. This is a firefighter leaning on a fence whilst watching a trapped driving instructor's car sink in 4 feet of floodwater. Looks very comfortable there, doesn't he? Just leaning against the fence.
Just chilling, just relaxing. Yeah, there were two. There were, in fact, 2 Essex fire and rescue crews, an ambulance and a police car parked near the sinking vehicle, but they wouldn't enter the water because they had to wait for specialist crews who were trained for the water depth.
Well, 2 people who weren't going to sit back and watch were these 2, Jack and Danielle Price, who took it upon themselves to rescue the submerged driver. And Danielle joins us now. Very good morning to you, Danielle, and you are a hero, an absolute hero. What happened in this video? Make sense of it for us.
So we were filming in the area for our YouTube channel, and we've seen the fire brigade come through. I was actually out at 5 o'clock in the morning with my husband, Jamie. We know it always happens there, as you can see, and it was clear. We've seen the fire brigade come through, we've followed them, and they're just standing around as if nothing's happened. In the clip, it says he's fine, he's on his phone, and then sort of walked away. But what they failed to realise is when my partner actually opened the door, as you can hear, he's on the phone to the emergency crew in panic, thinking he's going to sink. So we could not just sit there and watch. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah, poor bloke. Well done, you. Do you reckon this is health and safety gone mad?
It is, because although I do sympathise with them, they are so red-taped, but surely sort of common sense has to kick in as open the door.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. It's time for Social Sensations. That's the part of the show where we wade through the turbid waters of the internet and see what's been going viral. So first up, the issue of stereotyping women. It's made even worse when the stereotyping is made by a man. Says trans activist and influencer Dylan Mulvaney has released a debut single, a song called Days of Girlhood. Let's have a listen. I think, let's be honest, he's trolling. He's having a lot, there's no way that, comedians get people having a go at them for sexist jokes. That's the most misogynistic thing I've ever seen, probably. Well, but of course he's getting away with it. It's bizarre, isn't it?
I don't know how he's getting away with it. Yeah, my girlhood didn't look like that. We were far less...
Were you not drinking champagne and shopping and retail therapy? And...
more acne, less sex workers for friends. It was a lot less.
But what I don't understand is why very progressive people are looking... This is like the equivalent of Bernard Manning doing a video.
I absolutely agree with you. It's like if it was 20 years ago, everyone would be having a fit and saying, well, it's lad culture, it's gone far too far. But here we are, 2024, welcome, you know.
I mean, women are right to be annoyed about this, right?
I'm not necessarily sure about that. I'm a huge fan because I work as a Dylan Mulvaney lookalike.
You do, yeah. No, it's good for your career, I can see that.
I was a Nicola Sturgeon lookalike, but then she left that way. Me and friends were speaking about it, and it does seem slightly performative.
Well, just every stereotype of women, every ridiculous negative stereotype, just put into one video, and just because he's declared himself to be a woman.
Well, that aside, I just find her too smiley.
I can't believe you're calling her her. Because that means him.
Is that not what she is?
No, of course not.
Okay,
it's a bloke. Right. It's a bloke who's just declared himself and is performing, cosplaying as a woman, using every possible stereotype.
I'm an espresso pod. There
we go. There we go. OK. I think it's all a big troll. I think he's going to come out in a couple of years and say, I got you all. I think that's what's...
he's actually on the other side all along?
I think he's satirising woke culture.
Yeah, well,
I really do, because I don't...
job.
Anyway.
Did you like the song?
No. It's like one of Danny's worst B-sides.
Hey. Save that for the locker room.
OK. So next up, this video of a police officer telling off American tourists for bothering one of the King's guards by trying to get him to tell them his name.
Right, ladies. So these soldiers serve their country, all right? They take their job seriously. They are responsible for protecting this facility. They are not an object of ridicule. I appreciate you having fun. He's not having fun. He's got a long day. There's a lot of hours he's got to do. It is tiring, exhausting.
I mean, they're not allowed to move, are they? That's the thing. So, because
I don't think they're allowed
he should have just stabbed them with that bayonet.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Get the gun involved. Is that incitement to violence? Sorry.
They're so annoying, aren't they? Look, I love lots of American people. I have American friends, but there is a tendency among certain Americans to do that.
It's not the Americanness.
No, it's
the being a teenager.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Do you think, if we lived in a different type of state, they would have been impaled?
Are tasers still a thing?
They are, but they don't have them in the guards.
Oh, right.
Okay. What would you find them annoying?
What do you think? I find everyone annoying.
Yeah. But
for the noise I make, I can't stand loud people.
Isn't that funny?
It's weird. I'm very
Double standards, Bruce. Double standards.
Henrietta Hypocrite.
Is that what you should Yeah. Henrietta Hypocrite and Hate Monster. That's what you're known as.
Henrietta the Hate Monster.
Henrietta the Hate Monster. There we go. Right, so finally, Lee Anderson has been making some interesting career choices recently, but could he now be making a bid for the pop charts?
Hey, Dylan.
Let's have a listen. I think it needs a remix or something. A bit of work.
The Trouser Enthusiast remix.
It's something like that, or Motivate, or something like that.
Absolutely.
Moby needs a crack at it, or something like that. Yeah.
You're not saying that Moby's on crack?
No, I'm not.
No, I just wanted to
not
get that clear. Sorry about that.
Do you like the song at least? It's.
I'm really not bothered by any of that. I think Lee Anderson has bigger problems than a sing-along in a community centre, to be perfectly honest.
Well, it did go viral. I
haven't seen it. I mean, I work here. How have I not seen that?
I thought it was compulsory for us to watch that.
Well, yeah,
but I would not be joining in.
No? Okay,
no, I don't think so, no. I find it offensive. OK, let's move. It's just a song. It's so annoying. OK, we're going to now talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. Thank you ever so much for emailing in with all of your problems. We have got a dilemma here from Stuart. Stuart says, my boyfriend always insists on wearing a stupid, oversized green Stetson to the pub on St Patrick's Day. He goes out looking like a gnome. Any advice how I can tell him he looks ridiculous? I think you could just tell him he looks ridiculous, guy. All this sort of diplomacy within relationships, I think if you're going to go out looking like that, you need someone who is there to correct you and say, no, that's a mistake.
I think that's... So we temper each other's madness.
Or do you think the alternative is actually in relationships you should endorse and support no matter what decisions your partner makes?
No, that sounds terrible. I think you should send emails to a TV show and then get them to sit down and watch it together.
For all we know, Stuart could be a woman and not gay. This could be lies.
Well, it could be completely made up, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't think... But don't break the spell.
Sorry.
Let's assume this is a real dilemma.
OK, just get him told.
Yeah, get him told. Why email me? What's it got to do with me?
Exactly. I'll go round.
You go... That's the solution. We're going to send Bruce over.
On his way.
The hate monster is coming for you, and it'll all be resolved. Anyway, let's move on now. This is a dilemma from Lizzie.
Oh?
Lizzie says, I have a tattoo of a long-dead pet on my inner upper thigh, and since I put on weight, it's become really stretched. Barely looks like an animal. Should I pay to have it removed? So
yes.
It started out as a whippet, and now it looks like a rhinoceros.
You are a disgrace, Lizzie. Put the Pringles away.
I mean, so is the problem that she's getting wet? Was it? Why have the pet on your upper inner thigh? To me, that's disturbing.
I think that's actually gross.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think that leads on into other things, but I'm not going to say. And I think...
But who's that for? Because the only people who see your upper inner thigh... Unless you're wearing a bikini, maybe.
I don't know. She could be promiscuous.
Well, I don't like to assume.
Well, I'm getting that vibe.
Yeah, but
so there, I've said it. Lizzie's promiscuous.
I think if you've got tattoos of pets on intimate places, you're probably not that promiscuous.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. I don't think that's a hot
You're either
move.
against me or with me, so pick a side.
Yeah. You're very Trump at the moment, aren't you? Very Trump.
I think you have to be.
Yeah, you do. Cressida, thoughts on that one? Have you got any tattoos?
No, I haven't. I escaped that. Isn't it a miracle? I would have thought by now I would have like a fairy on my ankle or something, but I got away scot-free.
I do.
But if you were going to have a tattoo, it wouldn't be that.
Lizzie's dead pet? No, I'm right there.
Wait, I don't even know what the pet
was it dead? Was it like a tattoo of a corpse?
She said it was a long dead pet, which I thought meant like a dead snake, and then you quite rightly said it's probably a whippet.
I mean, for goodness sake. OK, well, thanks for emailing in, but don't do it again. Let's move on now to a dilemma from Ellie. Ellie says, I'm finding it increasingly more tempting to take milk from my office. It's a game changer when it comes to fighting the cost of living crisis. Thoughts? My thoughts are that you're an absolute thief.
Yeah.
I'm going to call the police. Do we have her details? Because I'm going to contact the police about that. What do you think about that, Bruce?
Yeah, no, I want her to lose her job.
I'm not normally for cancel culture, but that's outright theft. I mean, that's, what's the world coming to? It's ridiculous.
What did she say? She was borrowing milk?
No, she was stealing.
Stealing.
Was it oat milk? How expensive was this stuff? We don't know.
It's a disgrace.
It's a disgrace?
I know her mum.
Do you?
Yeah, and I'm going to text her after the show.
The hate monster is going to get involved. I mean, Cressida, that's outrageous. You don't steal from work, do you? You took one of the mugs, I think.
I keep being given them by Lewis Schaefer. If anyone wants a mug, I've got thousands of them.
Did you? I wanted a Christmas bauble.
Well, from the tree?
Ah.
Well, people were taking those. Oh, I shouldn't say that, but yeah, those were available.
I've taken stuff from here.
I know you have. It's all on security camera.
Bauble and a bit of glitter glue. We can make some ourselves.
Great.
So you don't think any thought? And can you should we just say you're a thief and that's the end of it?
You're a thief.
Just because it's milk and not jewellery doesn't mean it's not.
At least she's not lactose intolerant. That's one thing in a thief. Seriously.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
OK, well, look. This has been very enlightening. Thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when puberty blockers were finally banned, the Scottish police became even more authoritarian, if that was possible, and our elected representatives made total fools of themselves by talking for hours about ferrets. Thank you to my panel, Cressida Wetton, Ambrose Devlin, and to my guests, Lord Sewell, Sarah Fillimore, Kate Coleman, Nick Buckley, Maria Steen, Stephanie Davison-Wright and Kate Harris. And if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, that's very easy. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. Come along and join in the fun. Stay tuned for Mark Dolan. That's coming up next. Don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late-night paper preview show where comedians talk you through the next day's top news stories. That's tonight at 11 and every night at 11. And thank you so much for watching Free Speech Nation. Farewell.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the week ahead, it is remaining changeable across the country, but for the most part, it's going to be fairly mild. So as we end this weekend, still got low pressure in charge. This weather front here will bring another spell of rain as we go through the course of the night. Ahead of it, it does turn largely dry and clear, especially across parts of England and Wales. Some mist and fog forming in a few spots. And then behind it, it does then turn a bit drier and clearer for the end of the night across Northern Ireland. But for all of us, it is going to be a mild night. Temperatures not falling much lower than around 5 to 7 degrees. So we do start the day off with some sunshine across eastern parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, Lincolnshire way, but the cloud further west will spread its way that little bit further eastwards. Any rain on it will slowly peter out, so not actually a lot of rain arriving into East Anglia. And then behind it, it does turn drier and brighter, some good spells of sunshine developing before then the next band of rain arrives in the west. Mild temperatures